Hi, Miss Lim.
Hi, Viviana. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing well, thank you. Yeah. Oh, today I just upload what do you call tapioca cookie recipe on cat course for you guys. My sister suggests me to upload for you guys, so I did. You guys can check it out. Yeah. And for those of you who have not seen my announcement, so I mentioned that today we will have Professor Viney join our class. So I would like you all to give him a warm welcome and listen to his experience and stories. He had many experience in different places around the world. Okay, so he had some experience in Africa, experience in UK, and in the US. He had been to China once and for the academic project, or like for the discussion about academic project that he has the collaborator there. And and we had opportunity to listen to his audio record about his research on banana slug and giraffe saliva. So I hope you guys has inspired by him as I am. So yeah, I'm looking forward to have him in our class. So, yeah. And I think we'll give some time for people to log in. So probably like 5 to 10 minutes. And, yeah. I saw little Yoda from Fabian display. Is that Yoda? Do you call that Yoda?
Yeah, it's Baby Yoda, I think.
Baby Yoda. Oh. There is a name of the movie, right? It's not Star Wars, but it's like related to Star Wars. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's a new TV show called The Mandalorian.
Oh, I see. I heard from my friend too. One time she wore T-shirt, and that's the name. Could you please type on the chat box the name?
Yeah, I'll do it. Yeah.
Thank you. The Mandalorian. And you said it is a series, is that right?
Yeah, it's a show.
Show. Oh,
Yeah.
I see. Thank you. Is it on like Netflix or is on some program?
It's on Disney Plus.
Disney Plus. Oh, I see.
Hi, Miss Lim.
Hello, Stephanie. How are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm doing well.
I'm very happy.
Good. What make you happy?
Being in your class.
Thank you. And today, if you have not seen the announcement, we will have Professor Viney with us today. So he have many research experience and have many life experience too. Yeah, I hope you guys can be inspired as I am from him. Yeah. Oh, maybe before he joined us, I can show my artwork a little bit. Let me bring my artwork here. So this is the artwork that I made. I watched the YouTube channel by Multicultural Art Center, Merced, and they have like art session and they have hip hop too. So this one is the cat that the artist taught, and I and my sister drew one. This is mine. I use crayon as an outline, and I use colored pencil to fill in. And so yeah, and the one that my sister made, I can show you guys too. Thank you. This is the one that my sister made. So she used this pen, Micron 05, as an outline, and then she used colored pencil to fill in. And I also upload the link to, oh, hey, Professor Viney. You have a bobcat ear.
Oh, why not?
That's nice. Yeah, I just show my class about my and my sister artwork. Yeah, and, yeah.
Oh, very, very, very nice. And it looks like there's a lot more artwork behind you.
Oh yes, I do have the paper sculpture too. I can show right now. And maybe the one that you have too. This is the paper sculpture that I made, again from the same teacher who is Professor Viney's wife, Lisa. I made this paper sculpture, and here is the telescope. And I have this piece here. Yeah, look like a hair. And I have some upside down heart shape too. Yeah, so this was a great time and great experience making it. And this is one by my sister. This one, she planned it to be snowman with a scarf. And she made this fish too. Shoop. Okay. And this one should be, she said it is snake. And this one as a slider. And this is a house. Could be a hay next to the house. So yeah, that's some artwork. Let me see. Oh, let me correct his name. How do you, his name spelled as like this. Professor Viney name, like this. Yeah, so let me see. So I'm
going to put my headset on because then I can hear you better, but it doesn't fit very well with this hat. So that comes off.
Okay. Okay, so let me formally introduce him to all of us. Okay, so I would like you all to welcome Professor Viney together. And for me, his enthusiastic has inspired me to to improve my scientific writing, to improve my doing science experiment, and I am very grateful for his support, and very grateful to has him as my research advisor. And I would like everyone in my class right now to have the opportunity to listen to his experience as a life experience, and his research experience too. So please all welcome him here with me.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. And yes, it's well, and thank you for the kind words and for the invitation. And I cannot let those comments go unanswered, because well, you know, Miss Lim, yes, she was my student for a while, but in academia, it's really a two-way process, and it's not professor kind of has ideas and student goes and does them. One of the nicest things about being a faculty member, and I've been a faculty member. I've been let me see, I've been a faculty member for nearly 40 years, so quite a while. And in that time, I have learned a lot from my students. And that's really why I do it, because yes, I can hopefully help somebody to come up to speed in a particular area, but by the time a PhD student graduates, they are the expert in that field, not the advisor, because the PhD student had to go and discover something new, which the advisor wouldn't have thought about. So really, it's it's not a top-down thing; it's a collaboration, and the professor grows out, grows in knowledge, grows in understanding and in interest. And I assume that you have all experienced this as well, but you can't spend time working with Miss Lim without becoming a better person. So I think I grew as a person out of the interaction. So that's my reply to your very nice words there, and I mean my reply very sincerely. So I have been asked to spend the period with this class today. Let me give you a couple of ideas as to what you can ask me about. I do not want to be talking for the next 2 hours. That's no good. I want to hear your questions, and let me give you some ideas about the things I can maybe answer on. So I've been teaching, as I said, for about 40 years now. Technically not as a professor in the American sense of the word, but I got my bachelor's degree in 1980, so that was 40 years ago, 1980, from what I will tell people, the original UC. So if I say the original UC, in this case, I don't mean Berkeley, I mean the University of Cambridge. That's a UC, you see. And they're a bit like Hogwarts. They've been around for about 800 years. And so people joke, I represent something like, I suppose after 40 years, it's what, sort of 5% of the university's history or something. Makes me feel really old. But anyway, so that's where I went to school, as they say. So Cambridge in England. My degree is in materials science and engineering. Actually, my degree is in metallurgy and materials science. It's a natural sciences degree in England. But I faked it as an engineer for a while. So after getting a bachelor's, I stayed at Cambridge to do a PhD. And I was lucky. I got it done in under 3 years. I was just really lucky to land on a field which was kind of new and exciting. Then I spent another 3 years after that, so as what they call a postdoc. So 9 years in Cambridge, bachelor's, graduate school, postdoc. Then in the mid-1980s, I moved to San Jose, California. I worked for IBM as a visiting scientist for about a year. But I had promised somebody that I was going to marry them. And this person who I promised I was going to marry them, she was from Seattle, but I met her in Cambridge. She stayed there, finishing her PhD in immunology. And I keep my promises, so I traveled all the way back, got married, we moved to Seattle, was my first American faculty position at the University of Washington. So I'm a closet husky. I still have a lot of purple and gold clothes that don't fit me as well as they used to. And at the University of Washington, I started out in the materials science and engineering department, transferred into the bioengineering department after 3 years, and actually got tenure in the American system in bioengineering. Then what happened? So I moved, my wife got a job actually in Oxford in England. Now that's a bit crazy because Cambridge and Oxford, it's kind of like Stanford and Berkeley, you know, there's quite a lot of rivalry. But anyway, she got a job offer at Oxford, and I was lucky and got one as well. And so we moved back to the UK, I worked at Oxford, she worked at Oxford. For personal reasons, we moved to Scotland about 4 years later. And at that point, my wife stopped working. We had 2 kids by this point, and she was going into full-time mom. And in her own career, so she trained in biology and immunology, but she's actually an artist at heart. And now she teaches art here in Merced County. She teaches art at the different schools, and she teaches art. She's the education director at the Merced Multicultural Arts Centre. I moved north of the border to Scotland. I was actually ended up running a chemistry department there at Heriot-Watt University. It's a technological university in Edinburgh. A lot of first-generation students go there, so it's kind of an interesting place. In some sense, mirroring a little bit about the kind of demographics of Merced. Not so much in terms of ethnic demographics, but in terms of people's income levels and family histories of going to college and that sort of thing. So Heriot-Watt was named for George Heriot, who was a jeweler who hundreds of years ago gave a lot of money for education in Edinburgh. It was also named for James Watt, who invented a steam engine. So Heriot, the jeweler who gave the money, Watt, the engineer who invented the steam engine. So even now, you see in the UK, the person who gives the money, the financial donor, their name comes first, and the engineer sort of has to tag on at the end there. So that's just how things are everywhere in the world, I guess. But anyway, so there was at Heriot-Watt running a chemistry department, and Britain went through an economic downturn. This was by now the late, so it was 1999, 2000, 2001, 2002. The economy was going downhill, and I was being tasked by the administration to start to fire people because we had to slim down as a department and as a university. And that's a terrible position to be in. We've got to let people go just because the administration doesn't have enough money. So I figured out I didn't want to do that for very long, so I fired myself instead, and was lucky to find a job in the US, building something rather than shrinking it, actually building something. I actually got 2 job offers in the US, one on the East Coast, one on the West Coast. The one on the West Coast was UC Merced. And so I came here in 2003 as one of the very first 8 faculty who were hired into this place. So they hired faculty. The first group of 8 of us arrived 2003, just science and engineering at that point. No students, no curriculum, no buildings, absolutely nothing. And helped to design curriculum. Myself and a colleague, we started the bioengineering program here first, and then later started the materials science and engineering department. Now I am head of department in materials science and engineering. I have 7 other faculty who I'm very proud of, the 8 of us are the sort of core faculty, and then we have 3 very good lecturers who are also part of the team, and Miss Lim is one of the 3 lecturers. Now, what am I proud about in particular? That of the, so let me see, so it's 8 plus 3 is 11. Only 3 of us are guys and the other ones are all women. And I challenge anybody to find me the engineering department anywhere, and it could be any engineering department anywhere, where you've got 8 women and 3 guys making up the faculty. I'm very proud of that achievement, because, why is it my achievement? Because I encouraged an environment where we attracted good people, and all we did is we we hired the best people we could get. And we've completely kind of flipped the normal sort of gender demographics that you find in engineering departments. My research is to do with, I learn lessons from nature. So the lessons that I learn from nature, I play with spiders. Actually, these days I don't do quite so much research because I do more administration. I also teach quite a lot. I teach 4 courses. This is unusual for a Senate faculty member at UC Merced. So my research isn't quite as active as it used to be. But I teach courses, including Spark. And one of the things I've really enjoyed, looking back over nearly 17 years here at UC Merced, one of the things I've enjoyed the most is producing the creative process Spark seminar. So Miss Lim and I, we worked together in developing it the first time it was offered. So she offered it in the spring last year, she offered it again in the fall. I offered it in spring last year, not in the fall, I was teaching other things, but now again in the spring. What else can I tell you? Yes, okay, so not so much research, but it's involved playing with spiders to study their silk, and slugs and other snotty things to look at their mucus as a lubricant. I've been to Africa to go and chase hippos with National Geographic, actually. We're trying to make a TV show about collecting sweat from hippos. I take a lot of photographs in my non-existent spare time. I sort of masquerade as a professional photographer. One of my pictures is in the background that you see. Let me get out of the way. Just a random picture I took from an airplane in October, and we were flying from, and I mean, not flying, I wasn't flying the plane, I was just a passenger in a commercial flight from Portland to Fresno. Remember the days when you could get on a plane and go somewhere, we were allowed to travel, right? You know, those days. And I just looked out of the window and there it was, Yosemite. You see Yosemite? Okay. You see Half Dome?
Yes.
Sort of. Yeah, right. And the whole valley stretched out there. So anyway. So I said I wasn't going to talk forever. I've done quite enough already. Somebody asked me a question. Anybody?
Yeah. You guys can jump in or you can type in the chat box. Okay.
I can read the chat box. I'm going to allow Ms. Lim, she can be the curator. If people are putting up their hands or whatever, you know what my eyesight is like. So you can moderate and please do. That would be useful. I noticed that Stephanie, Stephanie Castillo Rojas, has spelt my name exactly like they used to spell it in Scotland. So all the time I lived in Scotland, they gave me 2 N's. So you see, it just makes me feel a little bit nostalgic about a place that I really enjoyed. Thank you for that. What kind of materials have I developed? Well, this is where I answer a little bit like a. Oops, there we go. I answer a little bit like a natural scientist. So my role in materials has been more to try and understand, to learn ideas and lessons. And if somebody wants to go and make them and actually like patent the idea or make a product, I tend to leave that more to the sort of what I would say the traditional sort of side of engineering, which is more in sort of manufacture and production. But broadly, the lessons that I've learned that I have passed on to people to go and do whatever they see fit with. Some of the lessons, like how it is that spiders are able to make such a strong and stiff and tough fiber. So what is the source of the mechanical properties of silk, and how are these tiny little spiders able to make such an impressive material? How can they squash the solution of polymer through a spinneret and actually get that to flow? So one of the things we discovered was that, and say we, because of course it's not me by myself, I have a research group who get into these things. So we discovered that the silk forms a liquid crystalline phase. So it goes through liquid crystalline type material structures while it is being spun by the spider. And actually, interestingly, even also the mucus under slugs when they crawl, that also goes through liquid crystalline structures. So the liquid crystalline state of matter does pop up from time to time in explaining and helping us to steer how biological materials behave. understanding that you might ask, why did I even study what slug slime and snail slime looks like? Because it's very similar to the slime that is inside all of us. We all contain slime. It's in our stomachs, it's in our intestines, it's in our lungs, it's in our reproductive systems. And when the slime, the mucus, stops doing its job, then you can develop conditions and health issues. So if mucus is not flowing in a stomach, you might get an ulcer. If it's not flowing in a lung, you might get, well, very bad congestion. But it's also one of the ways that people with cystic fibrosis have to suffer is because their mucus gets the wrong structure and it doesn't flow as well. Or sometimes fertility depends on the ability, so conception of, this is for people and also for dairy cows, any mammal, conception depends on sperm swimming through a mucus layer to get to its target and fertilize. If the mucus doesn't have the right flow properties, fertilization doesn't happen. So understanding the fluid properties of mucus helps people to get understanding for the behavior of this stuff in various situations, which even then, you know, kind of move into biological and medical interests. One other thing you might find interesting in terms of, because it's kind of shows you how creativity works, and I mean, this is what this whole thing is about, right? Is creativity. Sometimes you've just got to look at something and wonder if it couldn't be better. And I used to wonder about carbon fiber, right? You maybe heard of carbon fiber composite. You get it in skis, you get it in bicycle frames. You get it sometimes in construction, and certainly in vehicle parts, airplane parts, carbon with epoxy resin, and it's made into a composite. Now, how do you make that? You take carbon fiber, you put like resin, glue, smear it all over the fibers, and you bake this in an oven to cure, to set the glue. So you have to take your piece of glue and carbon fiber, you put it in an oven, you've got to crank up the heat on the oven, and you're heating up a very large room in order to heat the thing that you're trying to cook to go and cure it. It's just a random thought one day. I was looking at this and thinking about carbon fiber, and just realized I think I was actually teaching a class on conducting polymers, and I realized that carbon fiber is actually quite a good conductor. But you can make it very thin, and you make like thin strands of it, which is how they stack it in the composite. Then if you pass a current through something that's a thin wire, you pass a large current, it heats up the wire. So I started thinking, well, you know, why are we heating a room to go and heat up this carbon fiber? Why don't we just clamp both ends of it in a power supply and push current through it? And so we heat the composite from the inside out rather than the outside in. We can uniformly heat any one of those fibers at the same time, and we don't have to heat the room. And we started building little prototypes of that, and showed we use about 9% of the energy that you need for a conventional autoclave. The cure properties of what we made were better than what you make by conventional means. And so, you know, kind of using the built-in heater in something that people were actually just wasting time and money trying to heat. I'm kind of still happy with that idea, just because it was kind of taking what people normally do and sort of turning it upside down and coming out with something useful. So if you learned in this course about bending and breaking and blending, this was a little bit of, I think I bent something until it broke. That's sort of the creative process. All right, somebody else. What would I say is the biggest or best research that I have done? It's interesting that you asked me to say that, because really it's probably for somebody else to say. I think, you know, it's a little bit like, you know, I wouldn't go up to somebody and say, hey, am I fantastic or what, you know? You know, well, you know, I guess Donald Trump might do something like that, but I couldn't quite bring myself to. So how do we measure is biggest or best? What difference does it make? I think is what sort of difference who's been interested in it, and so if I can do any of the things that I talk about, I will at one time or another go and talk to elementary school kids, or middle school kids, or high school kids, or young students at community college, sometimes even not so young students at community college. Community colleges are great. People go back later on and get degrees. You don't have to be young to do that. But if I have a story where I can go and talk to people and say, look, isn't science fantastic? I don't think anything that I've done is ever going to, obviously I'm never going to get a Nobel Prize, right? But one of my students might. And so I think anything is good if it turns into a story that I can get somebody fired up with. Let me take another measure of success, and that is how many people do you think are interested in your work? Now, in science, if you actually, in any kind of research, if you publish something, people want a copy of your article. And so it's called a reprint of your article. Not so much these days. Now you just go online, right? You just look it up and you can download a copy and there you are. Now, 40 years ago, when I was starting into research and starting to teach, if you publish something, maybe somebody in another country couldn't get that journal because politically their university wasn't allowed to buy that journal, or perhaps the university, they spoke a language and most of the professors said, well, we don't want to read this in English, we all speak Czechoslovakian or something, or maybe it's a university in a part of the world where they just can't afford the library subscription for the journal. So in those days, what would happen is that somebody would send you a reprint request. So I'd go down to my mailbox and there I would get little postcards. They look like little postcards. And they just sometimes even got like stamped on them already, it's like a kind of a template, it really says, dear, you just have to write the professor's name. And I would like a copy of your article, you just write out the title of the article. This is before computers, this is before people, you couldn't just like email somebody or anything. So these postcards arrived in the mail. So I got very interesting little cards from very interesting parts of the world. And the paper that I got the most requests for, and this was from over 40 countries, had absolutely nothing to do with materials science. Well, that's not true. Everything's got something to do with everything because everything's interconnected. But it wasn't what I was really trying to get my PhD in. What I did was an experiment to answer an age-old question. And what the question was and I found this in a physics book. You guys have probably seen the same question. So the question is usually in the sort of heat section of like a freshman physics book, and the question goes something like, you've just made a cup of coffee. It can be tea, it can be coffee, it doesn't matter. But you've just made a cup of coffee. And you like your coffee with cream in it, and you like your coffee hot. You're just ready to pour the cream in, and the phone rings. Okay, now you think to yourself, I want to come back I want cream in my coffee, I want the hottest possible coffee. Do I put the cream in now and then go and talk on the phone? Or do I leave the cream out for now, go and talk on the phone and then put the cream in when I get back? Which of those scenarios gives me the hotter coffee at the end of the process? If you've heard that question before, like in a physics class, or it could be high school physics, could be freshman physics, or whatever. If you've heard that question before, could you use the reaction button and just put your hand up? Anybody heard that question before? Maybe they don't ask that question anymore.
Anyone? No.
It used to be maybe. But maybe none of them took physics, right? There's also that possibility. Any natural scientists or any physical scientists or engineers in your group there?
Yes, we do have some engineer and natural scientists.
Okay, well, I'm just going to, I've got to try another way here to see if everybody's actually awake at the end of your button there. So let me try another question. Okay, imagine you are the person making that cup of coffee. You are going to come back and you've got the phone call to deal with. You want to come back and have the hottest possible coffee with cream in it. Will you, those of you who think you add the coffee, those of you who think you add the cream before you answer the phone, please put up your reaction button. You add the cream before you answer the phone. Who thinks that? Okay, I'm seeing, and thank you for being the brave people to put your hands up. It's three of them, because Miss Lim put her hand up as well. Thank you. Four. Oh, right. Okay, so I saw about 5, I think, in total. Excuse me. Okay, people are finding their reaction button. It doesn't stay on for a long time. I'm going to ask that question again. And maybe you've changed your mind, but which one of you think you put the cream in before you answer the phone? Put your hand up again if you did. 1, 2, 3 for Miss Lim, 4, 5, 6. Okay, I'm seeing 6 people. Thank you. And I appreciate the interaction. It's not like in class where you can look at your neighbour and quickly decide if you're going to put your hand up or not. You've got to see who else's button's lighting up first, right? So, okay, so which ones of you think that you put the cream in when you come back from answering the phone? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, so 6. Oh, we're running even now. 6 of one, 6 of the other. So there are 26 of us here. So 14 of you haven't answered yet. So who doesn't know the answer? It's okay not to know the answer. Who can't decide? Okay, so the 14 of you who didn't put up your hand, or 13, because I'm actually one of them myself, aren't I, in the numbers. So 6 said, put it in now. 6 said, put it in when you come back. Nobody else has said anything. Okay, so the remaining people who've not put up your hand, you haven't admitted to not knowing the answer. Who doesn't care about the answer? You're not falling for that one. All right. Who's too nervous to put up there? Oh, this is interesting. So Emily Lee is saying, can't you do it at the same time? So you're going to, but that means so you're going to try and drink coffee while you're talking on the phone. Your coordination is better than mine, Emily. So if you're really coordinated and you remember to pour the milk into or the cream into the coffee and not into the phone, you know, yeah, maybe. Okay, so I am now I'm dying to know what Emily's major is. And of course, yeah, you've just made me give away my age here, Emily, because you couldn't put phones on speakers when I was answering that question the first time round. That was not an option when I had. But I'm really dying to know what Emily's major is now. Psychology. Ah, right. Oh, you see. That, of course, makes me nervous because you see, instead of you answering my questions, I just think I'm part of one of your experiments now. So. All right. Heat up the cream a lot. Okay, now that is another possibility. But the way the question is always asked in the physics textbooks, maybe that's why people don't get asked a question. Maybe everybody just knows about speakerphones now. You see, so the problem just goes away. But no. So that question used to be asked in books, and honestly, I had read books which had said, put it in now, or put it in later, or it doesn't matter. Now, they can't all be right. So being the sort of nerd that I can be, for a period of 1 year, every time I had visitors, and I was teaching, so I had students coming in for small group, just like tutorials. I had my friends come over. Yes, even scientists and engineers have friends come over sometimes, you know. So I was quite sociable. But every time I made a cup of tea or coffee, I performed a measurement. So my coffee making space, there were measuring cylinders and thermometers and a little stopwatch and all these kind of things. Of course, we didn't have a phone to take pictures with. We didn't have a phone to use as a clock. You know, this is sort of the old school here. But for a year, I did measurements because if people are arguing now, later, doesn't matter, whatever, well, you need to do the experiment. And so I did some experiments. In the meantime, I met somebody who was also interested in the same problem. We published a paper together in the American Journal of Physics. We actually published a paper on our findings from this study. And that paper had more interest from more people around the world. If you dig in the right places, you'll even find the occasional textbook now quotes our solution as some way that it was done. Or Wolfram Math actually one day even, I found that they had published that solution as a good way to analysis and break down a problem into its constituent steps and figure out, isolate what the pieces were. So in that sense, going back to the question, I've got to re-scroll here. What would you say to biggest or best research you've ever done? Well, if in terms of number of people who really got interested in it, it might have been that. So that's why I went off on that long story there. Okay, looking at the questions, what's my favorite thing about UC Merced? Oh boy, how long? We don't have long enough for that. Well, absolutely for sure the students, and I'm not saying that because I can't see most of you. You don't even have your pictures up here or anything live, so you might be rolling your eyes when I say that, or you might be really happy. But honestly, I think the students we have here, I'm particularly seeing this with now that we're all sort of in lockdown mode. So our students are doing a remarkable job. And my other class, so this semester I'm teaching another section of the creative process. So I've got my own section going. And then I'm teaching, it's a fourth year upper division engineering course on nanofabrication. So this is sort of pretty hardcore sort of engineering course. And so what I've got are college seniors. And of course, their commencement has just basically evaporated. But how are they coping with this? How are they coping with the job search? How are they coping? One of them she's also doing research with me. She's working on a little research project. And so that was in itself a bit of creative process. Okay, how do we do research when she's in Southern California and I'm sitting here in Atwater? And we figured a way, and she's willing to try it. And in fact, her kids' sisters are now interested in what we're doing as well. So I've actually managed to maybe do a little bit of outreach at the same time, which is fun. But I would say the optimism, the complex lives which individually students are dealing with and coping with and winning. That's something I really do like about UC Merced. Other things, the proximity to Yosemite. And so I enjoy hiking there. I enjoy doing photography there. So being close to Yosemite. Absolutely, the variety and quality of Mexican food in Merced and Atwater and Merced County and California. Now this is seriously important to me, guys, because let's see. So I mentioned earlier that I had 2 job offers in the States when I fired myself in Scotland, and I was coming back to live in the US again. And I had 2 places gave me a job offer. I was lucky. I applied for 2 jobs. I got them both. Now what? One's in Massachusetts. One's in California. All right. So one is near Boston. Great city. I love Boston, actually. Boston is one of my favorite cities on the planet. One's close to Boston. The other one's close to San Francisco. Well, San Francisco, great place, right? Another of my favorite cities. So both of the universities were out in rural areas. So the Massachusetts one was out in the middle of actually probably even more in the middle of nowhere than Merced is. Merced is a pretty large town by comparison to the place I'm thinking about. Then it got into kind of other things like, okay, what kind of food? What do people do? What's the culture like? Culturally, what do people do? Well, so this little place in Massachusetts, do they have do you guys have ethnic food? Oh yes. Okay, well, Chinese. Well, they had a Mandarin takeaway Chinese. Mandarin, it doesn't not so much spice, more sweet and sour, not a lot of kick to it. Okay. Do you have Italian? Yes. Oh well, this is good. What's the Italian like? They were referring to the local Domino's pizza. Okay, that was the Italian food. That was all the Italian food. Mexican. Okay, blank stare. all right, well, I guess where I'm not going to go. So, the great thing about Merced is, amongst many things, you can go to a different Mexican restaurant every weekend for a year, and you don't go through all the possibilities. And we have some really good ones. And if has Mr. Lehman, have you told your class about Jana Rodriguez and JNR?
I have mentioned about Jenna Rodriguez and Oscar, but I think you could provide more information about her. Yeah. I have told that she was an alumni at UC Merced in mechanical engineering, and she opened JNR Targo while she was a UC Merced student, and later she went back to study and got PhD from Stanford. Yeah, that's what I told her.
Well, that's a pretty good summary. So, I come to Merced. I discover, yes, but many indeed, the cuisine is what I was looking for, and then we even had a student who not only gets like Latin honors in her degree, she's like one of the best students I've ever met in my life, but she's also opens and runs one of the best Mexican restaurants that I've enjoyed, and she added to the cultural life of the town, and just the creativity there. And if anybody, anytime somebody says to me anything about people who shouldn't be in Merced and should go back home, and we don't say rude things about Hispanics and whatever. Well, I have a long list of people I'd really like to tell about, about people who've done great, about people who just make the world such a fantastically better place. And occasionally I have tried that, and sadly, what then happens is so I'm speaking up for the migrant, for the refugee, for the immigrant, and then people look at me and they tell me to go back home too. So one can but try. Yeah, for me actually, immigration. Well, I'm an immigrant here, and one thing I'll say: if you want to come to the US legally, you really have to want to do it, because the amount of paperwork is there's a lot of paperwork involved in that process. But also thinking back, you see, my mom was a refugee, and so my dad never went to college. He went to the army instead. So my dad was military, British Army, but didn't finish high school. And the reason my dad didn't finish high school actually was because of the Second World War, partly because his dad got so damaged from poison gas, from mustard gas, it's called, chemical weapon in the First World War. My dad's dad, my grandfather, died when he was in his 40s. And so the money dried up, and my dad had to go and find a job and start earning money. And so that's why he never went to college. My mom was German, born in Poland. And then she was born before the Second World War. And she was ethnically German. She was born to a family of Germans. She was fourth generation, so they'd lived there since the sort of 1850s, 1860s. Second World War comes along, so Germans come in, make life miserable for everybody, actually, including the Germans who'd been there for generations. Then the Russians came in from the other side, kicked Hitler out, and at this point, anybody who has any German ancestry is like in deep water. So my mom got hauled off to a concentration camp, from whence she escaped eventually. So my mom escaped from a Russian concentration camp in Poland with what she was wearing, no possessions, nothing, basically swam across the border to get into what became East Germany, and then swam across the border to get into what became West Germany. So my mom arrived in Western Germany after the war with nothing, and went off to college and got an engineering degree, as it happened. But that's just a complicated way of saying that I have a huge respect for the diversity and the history and the individual circumstances of just the amazing kind of collection of individual people whom I've met since I've come here to Merced. And you know, the cultural diversity is huge. It's not just Anglos and Hispanic, but if you look at the Asian community in Merced, in terms of number of people who speak languages in their home, Anglo is in the minority, maybe 30%. Spanish is maybe 40%. Hmong is somewhere, you know, making up the difference. And then there are many families, and I know some of them, where people speak Armenian or Punjabi or Japanese, Portuguese. And so this whole area here is kind of a microcosm of all kinds of interesting parts of the world. My wife, actually, she did a project some years ago, was just simply drawing the hands of people doing something culturally attuned to, you know, to the culture that they're from. So it may be somebody Japanese making mochi, or it may be somebody doing a dance or playing a musical instrument, or reminiscing about the job they used to have and pointing at something in a book, or maybe reading. She went to one of the Sikh temples in Livingston and actually did a painting of the hand of the person who was turning the pages of the book from which they were reading during their ceremony. So yes, I like UC Merced, and I like it for reasons of geography, for reasons of people, for reasons of food. Let me see, what else? Looking for more questions. Well, I've surely given you something to ask questions. There's a lot of information there.
And I saw the next question after what is your favorite thing about UC Merced is the question from Eric. How happy, genuine have you been with your field of work over the course of your life?
I can't answer that question. You know why? I'm still alive.
Oh.
Okay, so logically, you're going to have to try and channel me after I'm gone. that's only logically. Let's see. So let me get serious here. And so happy with my field of work. Totally. Actually, I mean there are, and I'm a reluctant administrator. You know, so the way it works, and it's a little bit like when you are a teacher. You know, sometimes you can be a teacher, you can enjoy your job, you can try and you know, be the best teacher you can be, and then eventually somebody decides you need to be the principal. And so you know, in university, so here I am. I'm a department chair. I was a department chair in Scotland as well, and it was chemistry there. It's materials engineering here. But department chairs, we end up having to do a lot of paperwork and administration, and I don't like that. But you know, if it enables other people to be better teachers and more productive researchers, then if I can look at it like that, then even the administration side of what I do becomes at least tolerable. But even now, I'm supposed, like, as a department chair, I'm supposed to teach one course a year. I teach 4. Well, what does that tell you? It tells you that I like learning. I like working with students. So yeah, it's even so. So the antidote to doing administration is do even more teaching than I'm supposed to do, right? So yes, totally enjoyed. Maybe you're asking about whether material science and engineering is something that I recommend. I do. Why did I do material science and engineering? Because it mixes physics and chemistry, and these days biology, and there's some math. And honestly, when I went to college, I actually, in Cambridge, in England, and all English universities, you declare your major before you even show up on day 1. You apply, you declare your major there's no such thing as undeclared. Maybe there is now, I don't know. I haven't worked in admissions in the UK for nearly 20 years, but it's you apply, you commit to a major. So I committed, I went and I wanted to study organic chemistry, which is kind of funny because actually I don't think I ever mentioned during this whole thing when I gave you a little bit of background. I started my background, I started talking to you about Cambridge. Well, much of my childhood, actually no, I'm going to stop myself here. Wait. Miss Lim, have you told them about where I grew up at all?
Have
you told them anything about?
I have mentioned that you have.
Don't mention the place, but have you mentioned where I spent much of my childhood?
Yes. So first you in yes. So first you in UK and then.
Okay. Stop.
Okay.
Thanks. Okay. So you have mentioned. Because some people are surprised when I tell them that my first language wasn't English. Okay, so my first language was German. I told you about my German mom, and so she, living at home until before you go off to school, I was speaking German before I spoke English. And then I grew up in, well, some people reckon I hadn't grown up yet, but I tried to grow up in South Africa as a kid. Moved to South Africa when I was 5, stayed there till I was 18. By the way, nothing that I've told you will help you to guess any of my passwords. On Facebook, they have always these quizzes about, what was your first girlfriend's name and, boyfriend, and what was the make of your first car and all these things. And they all look like the sort of security questions, but I've not told anybody anything today that you could use to guess any of my passwords. So. But growing up in South Africa, the school curriculum was very different to England. So I got to Cambridge wanting to study organic chemistry because it sounded cool. Yeah, organic chemistry. You can make medicines. You can make pharmaceuticals. You can make, like aspirin. Of course, that's like a freshman lab, but you can invent molecules to go and cure people. Well, the only difference was, you see, that I arrived having done none of this in high school, and everybody else had arrived doing a lot of it. And so I was so far behind in organic and in calculus. I struggled hugely during my first year. I mean, I really know what it feels like to be buried and feeling really dumb and really kind of just having to work your tail end off and hoping you're going to pass. That was me in my freshman year in Cambridge. 6,000 miles away from where I grew up, because growing up in Cape Town, south of the equator, I'm sitting there. It was miserable. And the thing that kind of occurred to me was, no, I can't do organic chemistry. I don't even like organic chemistry. Just the reactions weren't making any sense. But I still like chemistry in general. I still like physics in general. I don't want to give any of these up. And so they allowed, you have to declare a major, you can shift a little bit. And the first year is structured to allow you some flexibility in how you shift. So you can't go from natural sciences to engineering, but you can go within the natural sciences. And material science allowed me to do physics and chemistry together at a level where I can use them. So I have no regrets about studying that subject. It's a nice, broad, interdisciplinary subject. And it allowed me, you notice I mentioned later on that I became part of a bioengineering faculty. My materials background gave me enough background, enough knowledge to be able to move into bioengineering. And eventually, I was also, I think I mentioned, I was running a chemistry department. I still can't do organic, but you don't have to do everything to go and be successful. I can do physical chemistry fairly well, because that's the sort of chemistry you do in materials science, and inorganic chemistry. Yeah, I did a PhD in polymers. I still can't do organic chemistry, right? So I would do it all over again. I would do a career that is based on materials science. I really would. Notice, for those of you who are wondering about careers, that taking that career did not dig me into one pathway. So I was able to move laterally to bioengineering, to a partial career in chemistry. Professionally, in the UK, I am registered. I'm registered as a chemist. I'm registered as a physicist, both. Material science gave me that opportunity. So whatever it is that you study, whatever your major is, psychology, biology, economics, English, whatever your major, use it to grow your study skills, grow your critical thinking skills, grow your engagement with people outside of your discipline. So getting a degree doesn't condemn you to a deep, dark trench in that area. What it does is it allows you to acquire skills and knowledge and viewpoints and horizons, and take that opportunity and that aspect of what you're studying. And ultimately, you know, I think people often take Gen Ed and it's kind of there, and then they say, well, I got to, what is it? I've got to get rid of my Gen Ed, or I've got to finish it, or get it out of the way, or you hear phrases like that. Gen Ed is for employers probably the biggest single thing that you will learn as undergraduate students. It is that interface between yourself and the other people who make up the company or the organization or the fraternity or the society that you're going to be part of. So, again, long answer. But I really would do materials all over again. Anything else most interesting? Do I think that materials science and engineering is still a new major that has untapped potential? Yes, I do, because if I look at the, so do I think material science and engineering has untapped potential? There are certainly a lot of jobs in it, and the number of jobs now. Actually, I'm just sort of, I'm not going to take back what I just said. But what I'm going to, I don't know what's going to happen in the job market in detail. Of course, as a result, you know, there's a lot of people out of work right now. There's probably going to be some reshuffling about what people do. You know, society is being changed by what we're going through here with this coronavirus. But I think material science will come out strongly because it is so versatile. You know, there is this versatility of not just being entrenched in one particular way of thinking. You know, we can think like physicists, we can think like engineers, we can think like chemists. Some materials people, you know, obviously you can do research and teaching in many areas, but they also do finances. Right now is a really good time to understand how you make stuff, because if you're going to make stuff, you've got to find the ingredients for making it from. Those ingredients come from different parts of the world. Now you have to say who's got the natural resources, who controls the supply lines. So being able to look at you know, a laser printer or an inkjet printer and say, okay, it's got this and this and this and this in it. Now, where do those things come from? Who makes them? What do you need? That's actually going to be a very powerful way of thinking, I think, as we go forward. So I think jobs will always be strong in that area. Certainly in recent years, we've had many more jobs than graduates. So there's been a lot of graduates have been imported. People come to the US largely from Asia, but a lot of people come from China, a lot of people come from India to do jobs which have to be done, which pay very well, and we just don't have enough homegrown graduates to be able to fill those jobs. So there is definitely capacity. Sometimes people look at mechanical engineering and say, yeah, but there are many more jobs in mechanical engineering, many more jobs. Yes, there are. There are also many more graduates in mechanical engineering who are fighting for those jobs. Competing, I should say competing, I don't really fight, but you know what I mean, there's competition. So the number of jobs per graduate in materials is better than in any other engineering discipline that I'm aware of. And so I don't know why it's not more advertised, but even when I was an undergraduate, I hadn't heard of materials till I went to college. Probably because it's not so, we still teach traditional subjects in the high schools. We don't teach materials. Mainly, some schools do, they teach like a sort of a engineering or materials technology course. But mainly, you know, people take physics and chemistry. and their guidance teacher, if they're an engineer, they're probably an previously unemployed mechanical engineer, so they've got a job as a guidance counselor, and they're saying, go study mechanical engineering. So I think that the advertising for materials is something which hasn't gained a lot of ground over the time that I've been in the subject. And so there's always room for people like me to go and knock on a high school's door and say, hey, I can tell you about this degree. And then people get fired up about it, and a few of them go and take it. But there's a lot more room for people who want to take it. So if you know anybody who's undecided, send them our way. So yes, it is still untapped. Okay, so Damaris, Chaldes, Hernandez, to everybody. Miss Lim showed us many of your pictures. Is photography one of the things I do when I'm not working? Well, it's such an obsession. I think it's just a different thing that I do. It's a different job that I do. When I'm not working at university things, I do photography. But then being sort of competitive, and the two are related because in material science, you take a lot of pictures of stuff down microscopes. We worry about in material science. One of the things we learn about is the structure of matter, and how big are the crystals? What size are they? What shape are they? How are they interlocked? What other structure is in there? Sometimes it's more sort of forensic. You look at a piece of material under the microscope. This could be electron microscope. It could be using X-rays. It could be using light. Don't think just about the traditional microscope. But you can be looking and trying to figure out why something broke, or why something isn't performing as well as it should be, or maybe it just failed in maybe its magnetic properties or something. So there's a lot of what's called failure analysis. And so you look down microscopes. And I'm so old, we didn't have digital cameras, of course, in those days. So you had a real camera, which you might take the lens off and just put the camera back on the instrument, and on real film, photograph what you saw. And then we had to go and develop the real film in a darkroom. And then you had to go make prints of the real negatives in another darkroom. And I learned all that as part of my training in research. And I discovered I quite liked it. And I got interested in the science behind what light can do to film. And so and then I got used to looking at my pictures, and there were shapes and textures and sometimes colors. If I was using, often we use just black and white film, but you can use filters to kind of fake the effects of different colors. And of course, no Photoshop in those days. It was all done by hands-on, getting your hands literally wet in a darkroom and playing with filters and that sort of thing. And it was fascinating. And I got so interested in it that the person who taught the course, one day he was on vacation, and the other person who normally helped him was in the hospital. So I actually took over the department's darkroom for like 2 weeks. I didn't do any of their projects, but I did the teaching side of what they were doing. And it just kind of, and of course I'm married to somebody who's trained as a scientist, but actually her career has had more of her career has been as an artist. And that's been obviously a trigger and kind of encouragement as well. So yeah, but I take my pictures so seriously that I sometimes I feel like I need a break from it, so I go back to work, So what are my thoughts of beginning research in college for you as students? So this is from Marco Antonio.
For us as students. Yeah, for us.
Yes.
Yeah.
But so I'm so Marco Antonio Lopez, to everyone. What are your thoughts of beginning research in college for us as students? Well, I think everybody should. Now, it's not clear to me from your question that this is the downside now of doing. If I was in the room with you, I'd say, well, okay, do you mean do you mean should you do research, or when should you start the research, or in what field should you start the research? So I would ask for clarification. When? All right, thank you. ASAP. Well, that's the shortest answer you're ever going to hear from me all day today. Okay, don't apologise. No. So when? Let me think about it. So the sooner you can, because there's a couple of reasons why we do research and why we encourage our students to do research. One is to make a contribution as soon as possible, to maybe if they really know they want to be an ME, well, what's the forefront? Go and learn something about ME, where real engineers with their degrees already are helping, solving some problem that an ME would be asked to solve once they've graduated. So doing research gives you the ability to do something useful in an area that you are already excited about. The other thing it does is it introduces you to the method of research. And in that sense, it doesn't even matter quite so much what the topic is, as long as you can be excited about it, because research, inquiry, creativity, there is a sort of a method to it. There are certain things you need to become good at, like planning. The things you've learned in this class. Nobody can teach you how to be creative, but we can help you unlock the creativity that you have and discover it. So we can remind you how to plan. We can show you how to read efficiently, how to go to the library, how to find the things that will help you in your research, how to read those things and extract the best information, how to plan organizing something where you explain the research and justify what you've done. How do you communicate that research? Those are skills which are transferable between research projects. So that's another really good reason for getting involved. Sometimes research involves just getting familiar with the literature. Go and read 50 papers, or 5. You've got to start somewhere, right? But you get excited about it, you go and read 50 papers, not just 5. And then you get better at critically reading the paper. All right, is this a good paper? Is this a bad paper? What do you think about so-and-so's research? Are they careful? Do they do a good statistical analysis? Do you have any faith in that research? Would you rather believe somebody else's research because they're perhaps more thorough about setting up the statistics? The whole country is in a situation like that now. We look at any news channel, as long as it's a real news channel, it'll tell you about all these different tests for COVID-19. Can they find the antibody in people? Can they find evidence that you are currently suffering from the disease? Can they find evidence that you have suffered from the disease? Can they find evidence of your susceptibility to this sort of disease? And many different companies are rushing to claim that they can produce the tests. Which ones do you believe? You see, so research prepares you for life as well. It prepares you how to process this fire hose of information, often not in your discipline, because most MEs do not go and study virology, but still you get all this fire hose of information that people are trying to convince you that, yes, they did the most work to get you the tests that you need, or their test's going to work, or yes, we do have enough masks, or no, how do you process that? Research teaches you some of the techniques for coping. So yes, I never too soon to start. Somebody hasn't asked me what I'm drinking. I keep diving for this very large. This is a pint mug. So, what do people think I'm drinking?
Tea?
Of course. should be able to predict. Now I'm really going to scare Miss Lim. Okay, so because somebody said I've seen tea, coffee. I've seen LOL. No, I don't drink that. No, hot chocolate. Tea because I'm British. Yes, of course. Tea. Well, I'm American as well, but I still drink tea. But you want to see the American side of me. So here's the tea, and I'm sort of near the bottom of that one, and lined up just because I don't know how long I'm going to be stuck in this chair here, but here is the coffee. So I have a pint of tea and a pint of coffee, and that's because I'm doing 3 hours straight without the ability. So the test is I've got to drink enough caffeine to stay awake, enough fluid to stay hydrated, and remember that I have a finite bladder, and I'm an old guy. So if I run out for a short break, you'll know why.
Please, yeah. Yeah. If you need a break, we can break now too.
But I usually give my class a break round about the hour. So
Yeah,
I'm actually good, but
yeah. I usually have a break, like 5-minute break for my class too, around this time too. Like, yeah.
all right. Well, do that. So it says 4:40 on the clock on my computer. I'll be back at 4:45.
Oh, I said we have our DJ during the break time.
Oh, right. So let's see, 5-minute break. Everyone think of good questions. Right. Daily jams. Can you put a simp song? Some Tyler. So one of you is the DJ. Who's the DJ?
That would be me.
All right. Well, obviously a good skill. What's your DJ name?
I haven't made one up.
Oh.
I'm open for any suggestions though.
All right. Well, I will just file your name away and see if anything occurs to me at 3 a.m, which is when I usually get my weirdest ideas. I'll pass it on. All right. Ms. Lim is jamming out. I can't stand it. Oh. Wow. Well, I guess if I ever need a job as a voiceover actor, I know who I'm going to ask for a reference. Stephanie, definitely. I will. I know where to go. So, somewhere now, because with COVID, there's a lot of kids staying home and everything. There's somewhere I found three. I had 3 chapters from Winnie the Pooh. There might have been one of them for House at Pooh Corner, where I read those chapters. And this is how long ago it was. I'd originally read them into a cassette recorder for my mother-in-law, who was an elementary school teacher. And so this was, when I was first married. I read a few Winnie the Pooh chapters into a cassette for her to use with her class. And subsequently converted, I still have a copy of it, and I converted it into MP3. Engineers should be able to do that, right? Converted it in MP3, and so I sent it to, there's another one of our writing instructors, Dawn Trook. I think Miss Lim will know Dawn, and she's been looking for stories to basically spread around Merced. So I believe that somewhere now there are actually in Merced some kids who are listening to me read about Winnie the Pooh. And in some sense it's sort of appropriate, because A.A. Milne, who wrote Winnie the Pooh, and he was the father of the real live Christopher Robin. Milne is an alumnus of my college. So Trinity College, Cambridge, Milne was an alum there, long before I went, of course. And Christopher Robin Milne was also an alum of the college. And if you go to the library, so the college has, just to be clear here, so Cambridge University is basically a federation of colleges, is perhaps the best way to think of it. So you can think of each college as being like the states, and then Cambridge University is like the federal government, and they all have different rights, and there's certain things that the colleges can do that the university can't stop them, and vice versa. So it's not very complicated sort of interrelationships, but each college has a library. And Trinity, being a large and old college, has a very famous library. The main building that you see was built by Wren, so Christopher Wren, the architect of like St. Paul's Cathedral and so many churches around in London. He also, I think, was an alum of the college, as far as I lose track sometimes, but he basically for free built them this magnificent library back in sort of 16, whenever it was. And it is a beautiful building. And if you go into that part of the library, there are display cases down the length of the library, and each of them, they're covered to protect what's in there against the lights. But if you raise, you're allowed as a student, you can take visitors, and you raise the covers, one of those cases, it has got, in the same, it used to have at least, it had Newton's Principia, so the big book in Latin that Newton, where he described how he'd invented the calculus and all the physics that went with that. One of his copies of the printed book, where he was trying to, so he's written all over it where he found some typos or where he feels he could explain things better. So it's his own copy of his book where he's starting to write in it to prepare for the second edition. And in the same display cabinet is the original manuscript, the handwritten copy of Winnie the Pooh, as it was delivered to the printers from which they then typeset the book. So it's perhaps in that sense, there's sort of a connection if I'm reading Winnie the Pooh to people, that probably it's a reasonable choice of reader for that reason. But the older I've got, it gets more and more difficult for me as I get older to do Piglet's voice. Piglet and Roo, well, very squeaky, and I just can't do that anymore. Maybe Roo grew up as well, so did Piglet. I don't know. Can I try? I don't know. Of course, you'd imagine as I get older, I should be able to be Eeyore better. Oh dear, Eeyore. But
I recently read a 5-minute bedtime story about Winnie the Pooh too.
So you used to read it, did you say?
Yeah, this semester earlier this semester, probably in February, I borrowed a book like 5-minute bedtime story, Winnie the Pooh. So I usually read it before I went to bed. Yeah.
I will have to send you the MP3.
Oh.
I mean, I know where to find them now because I sent them to Dawn. You can probably just intercept that, just forward that email to you. I think like 3 separate emails because the files are quite large. Or I can just put them in a shared box folder if you like.
Oh, thank you.
I actually quoted Winnie the Pooh in my PhD thesis.
Wow.
Come to think of it, and it was in the. I had like before each chapter of the thesis, I had like a little quote from literature that somehow related to the contents of that chapter. So I think it must have been for the conclusions. I don't have my thesis is in my office on campus, so I don't have it here. I can't pull it off the shelf and look. But I quoted, because the conclusions in a thesis, as you know, sometimes you've got all these data and you're trying to figure out, what's the story here, right? So, on Monday, when the sun is hot, I wonder to myself a lot. Now, is it true, or is it not, that what is which, and which is what? So it's a sort of doubtful person trying to decide what his real conclusions ought to be. So, okay, more questions.
I think some of them may not know that you play musical instrument too. Maybe you can share, when did you start play a musical instrument?
Musical instruments. Well, yes, the little plastic trumpet, right? the loud, not very tuneful drums, right? No, I've always been interested in music. I think that's true. And my tastes, as you can imagine, at my age, they sort of tend to be a little bit more on the kind of classical. But I totally surprised one of my seniors when I started talking to her about K-pop the other day, which was she had no idea that I could recognize it if I saw it or heard it. So, but anyway, so I trained on classical organ.
Mm-hmm.
So, did you play Daria Burlak playing that rather heavy piece of Liszt?
Yes.
Yes, it's not the most tuned, it's not the most relaxing piece of music, but it kind of shows you what classical organ is to do. Now, I cannot play that piece, I should say. That's That's outside my pay. That's above my pay grade. But if you sat me down in front of that instrument, I would know what the various bits were there for, and you know, be able to play something that wasn't quite so intricate. Or at least I used to be able to. This is not something. This is something actually I do miss in Merced. I've not had the time really to go and find. I don't think such an instrument exists close by, but if it did, if there was one, I'd quite like to see it and then go and play on it quietly while nobody's listening. But you see, the joke is then that if people say, what instrument do you play? And I say, well, any instrument you like. Because, of course, on that sort of a large organ, there are pull stops or draw knobs or tabs, and basically they claim to imitate the sound of most kinds of instruments. And so if you want me to play an oboe, I would sit down in front of an organ, pull the stop that said oboe, and play something that sounded like an oboe, perhaps. And now, depending on the builder of the instrument, they may be more or less successful in actually duplicating the oboe sound in the way it was done. Now, these days, of course, you do it all electronically. So modern organ, electronic organ, you can basically synthesize the sound by just combining waves in essentially what's like a synthesizer. The historical organ, of course, you make those sounds just by blowing air through pipes, which is pretty amazing if you think about it. You can make all those sound types just by doing that. So I thought, yeah, it's sort of odd because I can play, or used to be able to play, you know, both hands and both feet. But if you ask me to dance, I panic. So it's not a coordination problem, it's some other problem, I think, when it comes to, maybe it's just because I'm so large and heavy, I don't want to step on anybody's toes or something. But I used to play which everybody does, I think, just about everybody plays like a recorder. You know, it's a sort of looks like a pipe with holes in it, and you blow into it and play. So you hold it a little bit like a clarinet. I know the fingering is different, but it's the same sort of position as you might play a clarinet. I learned that's how I first learned music, was on a recorder. Then years later, I was happy to discover that the Scottish bagpipe, the fingering for playing the tunes, if you are prepared to believe that bagpipes can play tunes, the fingering for the tunes is basically identical to the fingering that you would use on a recorder. So I do occasionally, if the opportunity presents itself, I will play something on a bagpipe just because I learned how to play it on a recorder a long time ago. We can possibly just give me a second here. Documents. Let me do my documents. You never know. I might find something on here. I'm finding pictures of Professor Snape. Here we go. So this is what I want. Pull up. Can I share my screen?
Yes.
Let me see. So you've given me permission?
Yes. Let me see.
It says hosts disabled attendee screen sharing. That's the default now. So it's always come on like that, which is good. So
could you try again?
Okay. Share screen. Yeah, there we go. So I'm going to share the computer screen. So here, your students will never ask me anything ever again after I do this to them. Let me see. So sharing client sound. This should work. So wow. What was that? Anybody want to speculate on what that was? They've all turned their earphones off. Okay, so the tune, correct, was Amazing Grace. Well, I'm glad you recognised it. What was that very strange thing that I'm playing? Any ideas? Sounds a bit like a strangled duck, but...
The hint he mentioned about the instrument earlier.
So it's what they call a practice chanter. So if you're trying to practice to play the bagpipe, they're very loud. I mean, they're really those instruments were built to intimidate people in battle. You know, so it's a secret Scottish weapon. So. So to practice, you've got the bag under your arm, you've got these 3 pipes sticking out above your shoulder, and then you're blowing into a mouthpiece, and then somewhere down with your arms extended, sort of hanging below the bag, there's a thing which you've got to do the fingering and to play the melody on. So to make it a lot quieter and easier to practice, what you can buy is the bit which you play the fingering on, and something that looks like a mouthpiece, and you just fit them together. So you leave out the bag, you leave out the drones that make that very loud sort of booming noise that goes with it, and you just practice the fingering. And so it's actually called the practice chanter. So it's quite loud enough. The little clip that I shared with you there was taken by one of actually, Miss Lim. Do you remember Robin Paldy?
No, I don't.
Robin spelt with a Y-N-N-E. She was a materials science undergraduate.
Yes.
Worked in Professor Liu's lab, same time as Rosenberg.
I remember.
James, right. So well, Robin took my polymers class one year, and she made little snippet videos. So they asked me to. We were talking about whether you can make musical instruments out of plastic.
Oh.
That got it started. So the whole question was, can you actually make any and how does the material that you make an instrument, how are its sounds dictated or modified by material selection and properties, right? And so there's a whole sort of bunch of stuff one can talk about there. But it's easy to make instruments out of plastic. You can just injection mold them, but they're not. The sound's not particularly rich, and the sound isn't particularly just the whole sound quality is different from what these things ought to be made from wood normally. But I brought that in, and so you might have seen all the math on the board behind. That was the dashpot and spring model for how to describe the viscoelastic properties of polymers, and it has some bearing on the reason why plastic bagpipe chanters don't sound like the real thing. So it was appropriate to bring it in and talk about it at that point. They still had to do the math.
And can this practice chanter can connect to the, if you have the connection to the bagpipe, can this one be connected as a big one?
You could, yes. It should fit. So it's the same physical dimensions as the 2 separate pieces, which are on opposite sides of the bag. And there's also a reed in it. So there's actually a little, which is also plastic. So the same way that a clarinet might have a reed, and an oboe is a double reed instrument, and some of the louder, more sort of flatulent sounding organ pipes have reeds built into them as well. So in that sense, a bagpipe is technically a reed instrument. And there's one that's sort of slightly sort of buzzing quality to the sound. It doesn't sound just like air going through a pipe with holes. It's sort of buzzing sound to it. That is created by the reed which is in there.
Thank you.
Yeah. But I have not played serious organ since my wife's sister got married, in the sense of serious in front of an audience, so I actually had to put up with it. I continued to play after that, just sort of quietly by myself, but I haven't played on a public setting for quite a long time. That's when Erin got married. She's still talking to me, so I guess I got it right. Yeah. So, well, I'm amazed your students are still there. They've been listening to me for how long here? So, good attendance there. Anything else? I can talk about hippos in Africa, or what it's like trying to start a university from scratch, or favorite recipes. Yeah, I won't do as good a job with your class as you did with mine.
No, you did really good job.
They loved it. Sie möchten, dass ich jetzt in Deutsch rede? Was soll ich Ihnen sagen? So that was, can you talk in German, from Stephanie. So I said, I said, you want me to speak in German? What do you want me to say? Yeah, that was, no, I kept it up for, so while I was, I took my confirmation, so when I was a teenager, I went to a church and was confirmed, which happens in many Christian religions, that people, baptism when you're very young, and then you confirm, usually in your teenage years, which is to basically say, promise the same things that were promised at baptism, but you promise them for yourself at that point instead of your parents doing it. And the church that I attended in South Africa was actually a German-speaking church. I took my exams in German, so used to be able to write it okay-ish and speak it enough to not completely make a fool of myself in front of a church congregation. But over the years, my ability to stand up in public and speak it has gone down a little. Actually, there's a UC Ed story for you. So, you know, when we opened, we didn't have very many faculty, and so the very starting faculty, we had to sometimes get called upon to do things that you wouldn't do in a mature university campus. So we had an anthropology student, PhD student, 1 year. So this guy comes along and he's doing, and let me think, his anthropology was relating to, now this is my ignorance here, I can't remember if he was an archaeologist or an anthropologist actually. His supervisor is an anthropologist, but he may have been doing archaeology as part of his project. The bottom line was that the part of the world where he was acquiring his samples from and reading about required that he be able to read German, because German researchers were the first people to go and examine this part of the world. It was somewhere in the Middle East, and they would do the dig and then come back and report in German. And so if you want to go back and follow the literature and the evolution of ideas, you really have to be able to read German as well. And in the absence of any professors of German, I actually ended up being the person who examined him on his ability to be able to translate a passage of writing from German. So they never tested me on my German, but it was sort of understood that I'm not going to claim something that I can't do. So and it wasn't like testing him in conversational German. It was just that he could choose which book he was going to do a translation from. And he was even allowed to look at that book beforehand, but eventually there came a point where he was locked in a room for 3 hours and he had to translate a particular chapter and he had to hand me what he did. And I got to read through it and just see whether it actually was plausibly translated into English. It's not very technical language. It was just there isn't a lot of technical language in what had been sort of early 20th century German arc and anth. I was also on somebody's history, on a historian's doctoral committee at one point. So Professor Herken, who was the founding professor of history, had a graduate student who was looking at one of the Second World War aviation generals. So Curtis LeMay, for those of you who've read or heard, or perhaps you're from a military family, Curtis LeMay, he was rather, he was head of Strategic Air Command after the Second World War, and quite a hardliner. So he was very much on the sort of be ready to fly in and drop nuclear bombs on anybody sort of person. But I ended up on the doctoral committee of one of Professor Herkin's students, not because I know very much about the history, but because I'm awfully interested in. I knew nothing about Curtis LeMay at all, but because I have some interest in what keeps planes in the air, because material science, you see, so it comes all the way back to materials engineering. One of the historically greatest developments that went hand in hand with developments of material science was aerospace. And material science advanced because people needed things for aerospace, and then material science made advances and then suggested new things for aerospace. So I knew something about the planes that LeMay was flying, and what those planes could do, and how his decisions impacted and were in some sense controlled by what he could get out of the machinery and the aircraft that he had at the time. So I ended up on a thesis committee about American history. We can't do that now, of course, because we have enough historians and people. But anyway, so Damaris says, what language should you learn? Well, the obvious question for me then is, which languages do you know already? So Damaris, if you can type. So English and Spanish, right? Well, you know two very useful ones. And what is your major? Just were you the ME who was writing earlier? I get back up. Chemistry. All right. Well, if you want to learn, if you end up reading some of the early chemistry, German could be useful. So German is a lot of the great advances in chemistry through the 19th and the early 20th century were in German and have not been translated. So I've actually found that my knowledge of German has been useful in reading science. Similarly, French could be possible, and French is spoken for historical reasons in science, but also for it's quite well spoken around the world. So for science, I think you could learn, and historical science, French or German. For modern science, I would say learning Chinese wouldn't hurt. I think if I had lots of time, I would read. I would learn Chinese, possibly Arabic, just because it is a very widely spoken language. And a lot of the issues in the world are, if you like, based or emerge from countries where Arabic is spoken. I would love to be able to read an Arabic newspaper, or I'd love to read the Quran, because it is so often quoted and misquoted and used as an example. You know, people tell me that the Quran is a very peaceful book. They tell me it's a very militant book. Well, anyway, I'm going to find out for sure. It's like that, going back to the tea and coffee. I have to do the experiment myself and figure out, go and read it. So, you know, I would say Arabic could be useful for sort of geopolitical reasons. Chinese for scientific and geopolitical reasons. It wouldn't hurt to learn classical Latin, because classical Latin actually helps you to. Classical Latin, you'd be able to, and Spanish that you already have. French would become very easy, and so would Italian. I certainly wish I'd done a better job of learning Spanish. When I first came to Merced, so 17 years ago, I went to Merced College. I took a semester of Spanish. They didn't go very far. It was more cultural Spanish than kind of structured Spanish, but it was cultural, and I could read Spanish to a point myself, because partly because I did take Latin in high school. Again, just from being so old, took Latin, and then I worked with, when I was living in Oxford and then in Edinburgh, Scotland, before I came to Merced. I had Spanish collaborators. I worked with a Spanish research group in Madrid. And so I learned enough Spanish between my Latin and just, you know, being interested in things. I could read enough Spanish to navigate. I don't feel at all lost in Madrid. I can read the signs and you know, figure out the subway and order food and get that far. I would never speak it conversationally. I'd never ask somebody. I'd never conduct a job interview in Spanish. But I really wish I'd learned more about it, because I I had set myself a target of giving a lecture in Spanish someday, and I'm nowhere near being able to do that yet. But yeah, emerging parts of the world, South America is going to be very important during your lifetime. And again, most of South America speaks Spanish. There's Portuguese, of course, in Brazil, but Spanish is understood in some parts of Africa. It's understood in some parts of the East. So definitely, you're off to a good start with that. Yeah. Math is a good language as well, by the way. it translates relatively easily between some of the other languages. I once took a survey here. I was asked to go and talk to a fourth grade class about just go and entertain them with math. So I tried to figure out how to go and entertain a fourth grade class with math. And the first thing I said, well, what language do you guys speak at home? And that's where I got Spanish, Hmong, English, Punjabi, excuse me, Armenian, and all these different languages. And I said to them, well, the language that you're going to learn today, you can, whatever you speak at home, you can really talk to each other, no trouble at all, because it's very precise. It has very well-defined rules, and the symbols are fairly universal. I'm just going to mute myself. I have to cough, and I don't want to blow your ears out. I guess the clock says we're almost done, so last chance, I guess. Do you have announcements that you need to talk about for next time? Have you done that already?
I have just a reminder for for the reflection question and for the update from the convener for the convener to email me about your potential optimal solution and how your team split the work for the second report. Yeah.
Okay. Well, good. You need all that.
Yeah. I think let's thank you, Professor Viney, for his time and sharing his experience with us today. And I really appreciate his time and his experience that he shared with us. Thank you so much.
You're very welcome, and good luck to everybody. Good luck as things tends to get a little bit busy at the end of the semester, but you're all coping fine. The fact that people have sat through 2 hours of listening to me kind of going off on different tangents, you've got a very committed class here. So congratulations on that, and congratulations to all of you for having a good work ethic. And I'm sure you'll do very well. Good luck. And if you take a course from me at some point in the future, just remind me that we first met in this particular room. All right. All right.
Okay.
Oh, take care, everyone.
Thank you. You too. Okay.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Lim.
You're welcome. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Ms. Lim. Have a good day.
You too. Thank you.